Hey guys, tonight we're diving into a world that, frankly, makes our current lives look like a spa day. Imagine waking before the sun, not to the gentle glow of your phone, but to the harsh clang of a bell, summoning you to a cold, dark chapel. You pull on rough wool, your breath fogging in the frigid air, and the scent of damp stone and stale incense fills your nostrils. No hot coffee, no comfy slippers, just the relentless demands of a life dedicated to God. Or at least, what they understood of it. This isn't some historical theme park. Folks, this is the unvarnished reality of being a medieval monk. You might think it sounds peaceful, serene even, but trust me, you probably wouldn't last a week. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now, tell me, where in the world are you tuning in from tonight? And what time is it there? I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself in a time utterly alien to your modern sensibilities, a period where life outside the walls of a monastery was often brutal, short, and filled with uncertainty. Famine, plague, warfare. These were not distant news reports, but looming threats that shaped every waking moment. The world was a place of deep, unyielding faith, where the line between the divine and the demonic was blurred, and salvation was an ever-present concern. For many, seeking refuge within the consecrated walls of a monastery wasn't just a spiritual calling, it was a pragmatic choice, a desperate attempt to escape the relentless grind of feudal existence. You might envision a monk as a serene figure, lost in contemplation, but the truth is far more complex and, at times, incredibly demanding. Consider the landscape of medieval Europe. Life in the villages was dictated by the seasons, the whims of the local lord, and the constant struggle for subsistence. Disease was rampant, and medical knowledge was, by today's standards, almost non-existent. A simple cut could lead to a fatal infection. A fever could claim you in days. The prospect of a life devoted to prayer, study, and manual labor, however rigorous, offered a degree of stability and security that was simply unattainable for the vast majority of the population. You see, the monastery wasn't just a church. It was an economic engine, a library, a school, and sometimes even a hospital. It was a self-contained world designed to weather the storms of the outside. So, you, as a prospective monk, stand at the gate of this imposing structure. Perhaps you are a second son, with no inheritance and no prospects in the outside world. Maybe you are a scholar, drawn by the promise of access to ancient texts and intellectual pursuits. Or perhaps, and this was often the case, you are genuinely moved by a profound religious conviction, seeking a path to spiritual purity and eternal salvation. Whatever your reason, the decision is momentous, a complete severance from your former life. You are about to shed your old identity, your worldly possessions, and even your family name, embracing a new one in Christ. The first step in this journey is often a period as a novice. This isn't a quick tryout, it's an intense, year-long probation where you learn the ropes, or more accurately, the rules. You're learning Latin, if you don't already know it, the language of scripture and scholarly discourse. You're studying the rule of Saint Benedict, the foundational text that will govern almost every minute of your existence. This rule, written centuries earlier, is a masterpiece of pragmatic organization, laying out the precise duties, behaviors, and expectations for communal monastic life. It dictates everything from how much you sleep, to what you eat, to how you should behave during prayer. You quickly realize that personal freedom, as you understand it, is a concept utterly foreign within these walls. Your days as a novice are a continuous lesson in humility and obedience. You are taught to rise before dawn for matins, the first of the canonical hours. The air is cold, the stone floors unforgiving against your bare feet or simple sandals. You join your fellow novices and the fully professed monks in the dim light of the chapel, voices rising in unison in Gregorian chant. It's repetitive, often monotonous, but there's a powerful, almost hypnotic quality to the ancient melodies. This is not about individual expression, it's about communal worship, a unified offering to God. You're learning to put aside your own desires, your own comforts, for the sake of the community and the divine. The stripping away of individuality is a core tenet of monastic life. Your clothes are replaced with a simple habit, usually rough wool, often undyed. Your hair might be shorn, your personal belongings given away or abandoned. You are taught that attachment to worldly goods is a distraction from spiritual growth. This wasn't just symbolic, it was a practical reality. Monasteries often operated on principles of shared poverty, where all possessions were held in common. You owned nothing, desired nothing, and relied entirely on the community for your basic needs. This radical detachment was meant to free your soul from the burdens of material existence, allowing you to focus solely on God. The concept of vows is central to your commitment. After your novitiate, if you are deemed worthy, and if you still desire this path, you will take solemn vows. These are not merely promises, they are lifelong commitments. The three core vows are poverty, chastity, and obedience. Poverty, as you've begun to understand, means renouncing all personal possessions. Chastity means a life of celibacy, a complete abstinence from sexual relations. This isn't just about physical purity, it's about dedicating all your love and devotion to God. And obedience, perhaps the most challenging for many, means surrendering your will to the abbot or prior, the head of the monastery. You are expected to obey without question, to trust in their wisdom and judgment as representatives of God. This complete submission to authority, while difficult, was seen as a pathway to spiritual liberation, a way to conquer the sin of pride. Historians still debate the extent to which these vows were truly upheld by every single monk throughout the medieval period. While the ideal was absolute, human nature is, of course, complex. Instances of monks leaving the order, or even cases of lax discipline, certainly existed. However, the prevailing ethos was one of unwavering commitment, and the social pressure within the monastic community to adhere to these vows would have been immense. You can imagine the constant self-scrutiny, the internal battles, the perpetual striving for an almost unattainable ideal of spiritual perfection. It wasn't about being perfect, but about endlessly striving towards it. Consider the silence within the monastery, especially in the cloisters and during specific hours. Silence is not just encouraged, it is often enforced. This isn't a casual quiet. It's a profound, deliberate silence designed to foster introspection and prayer. You communicate through gestures, through necessity, or through whispered words during designated times. This can be jarring for you, accustomed to a world saturated with noise and constant communication. But in the monastic setting, silence is seen as a conduit to the divine, a way to quiet the mind and listen for God's voice. It's a powerful tool for self-discipline, a constant reminder to focus inward rather than outward. You learn to observe, to listen, to be present in a way that is profoundly different from your former life. The decision to become a monk was often not a sudden impulse, but the culmination of a deeply felt sense of calling, sometimes influenced by family or societal pressures. For a medieval family, having a son or daughter, for there were convents for women too, enter religious life was often a source of great pride and a means of securing spiritual intercession for the family's souls. It was a tangible connection to the divine, a literal investment in the afterlife. You, however, are now experiencing it from the inside, feeling the weight of expectation, the pressure to conform, and the immense responsibility of your new spiritual life. The novitiate tests your resolve. You're learning the Psalms by heart, hundreds of them, reciting them daily in Latin. You're assisting the more experienced monks with their duties, whether it's tending the monastic gardens, copying manuscripts, or helping in the kitchen. Every task, no matter how mundane, is framed as an act of devotion, a service to God. You're discovering that the monastic life is not one of idleness, but of relentless activity, both spiritual and physical. There's a subtle humor in the idea that you thought this would be a leisurely existence, only to find yourself busier than ever, just in a profoundly different way. You're not just reading about devotion, you are living it, breathing it, every single day. You've made it through the novitiate, a year of relentless spiritual and physical conditioning designed to weed out the less committed. Now, as a fully professed monk, the rhythm of your life solidifies into an almost unchangeable pattern. Your days are dictated by the canonical hours, a strict schedule of prayer, study, and labor that begins long before dawn and continues until well after sunset. This isn't just a suggestion. It's the very backbone of your existence. Each hour is a bell toll, a summons, a constant reminder of your vows and your dedication to God. The first bell shatters the pre-dawn quiet, often around 2 or 3 a.m., calling you to matins. You stumble out of your straw palliasse, or perhaps a simple wooden cot, into the frigid air of the dormitory. There's no time for lingering, no thought of hitting a snooze button. You pull on your rough habit, the coarse wool chafing against your skin, and make your way in the dim light of a lantern or a flickering candle, or sometimes, just by memory, through the silent corridors to the chapel. The air hangs heavy with the scent of old stone, cold and damp, mingled with the faint aroma of beeswax and incense from the previous day. Inside the chapel, the silence is profound, broken only by the shuffle of feet and the occasional cough. You take your place in the choir stalls, a designated spot for each monk, and the collective voice of the community rises in solemn Gregorian chant. Matins is long, perhaps 2 or 3 hours, filled with psalms, readings from scripture and commentaries by church fathers, and prayers. Your eyes, if they can, follow the words in your psalter, but often, the darkness is too deep, or the script too small. You learn to rely on memory, on the collective rhythm of the prayers. A deep communal resonance that both soothes and demands your full attention. It's an endurance test, a spiritual marathon, and a vital start to the day. After matins, there's a brief respite, perhaps an hour for private prayer or study before lauds. The morning praise, coinciding with the first hint of dawn, as the light slowly infiltrates the stained glass windows, painting the stone with muted colors. There's a sense of renewal, a quiet beauty in the rising sun. Lauds is often followed by the chapter meeting, a daily gathering where the abbot addresses the community, perhaps assigns tasks, corrects minor infractions, or reads a chapter from the Rule of St. Benedict. This is where the practical administration of the monastery takes place. A brief interlude of spoken words before the pervasive silence descends once more. Then comes prime, typically around 6 a.m., marking the first hour of daylight. By now, your stomach is likely rumbling, but breakfast, as you know it, simply doesn't exist. Your energy is sustained by the previous day's meager evening meal. Following prime, the bulk of your working day begins. This is not a life of pure contemplation. Manual labor is a fundamental aspect of the monastic ideal, seen as both a penance and a necessary contribution to the self-sufficiency of the community. You might find yourself in the scriptorium, the monastic writing room. Imagine a vast, cool hall, perhaps with light filtering in from tall, narrow windows. Here, you sit at a wooden desk, often hunched over a large vellum page, a quill in your hand. The work is painstaking, slow, and incredibly demanding on your eyes and back. You are copying texts, Bibles, theological treatises, classical works, or even the monastery's own records. Each letter must be formed perfectly, each line straight. This isn't just transcription, it's a form of prayer, a meditative act of preserving knowledge for future generations. The ink is made from gallnuts and iron salts, the parchment from animal skins, painstakingly prepared. Errors are not easily corrected. You spend hours, sometimes days, on a single page, your hand cramping, your eyes aching from the strain. The cold in winter is biting, making your fingers stiff. In summer, the heat can be stifling. Or perhaps you are in the monastic gardens, tending to rows of herbs, vegetables, and fruit trees. This isn't just about sustenance, it's about cultivating discipline and providing food for the community. You might be digging, weeding, planting, or harvesting. Your hands calloused and your back aching from the stoop labor. The scent of damp earth, rich and fertile, fills your nostrils. You learn the rhythms of the seasons, the subtleties of plant life, and the sheer effort required to coax food from the ground. This physical labor connects you directly to the earth, a tangible manifestation of your detachment from worldly comforts. The monastery also often had its own bakehouse or brewery, and you might be assigned duties there. The heat from the ovens, the smell of baking bread, the sweet aroma of brewing ale, these are rare sensory comforts in an otherwise austere existence. You might be kneading dough, stoking fires, or mashing grains. The work repetitive but essential. These are not just chores. They are vital contributions to the survival and well-being of the entire monastic family. At terse, around 9 a.m., you pause for another round of prayers. Then, it's back to work. Your life is a continuous loop of prayer and labor, seamlessly interwoven. There's no distinct break between your spiritual duties and your practical tasks, as both are seen as pathways to God. This holistic approach to life is a defining characteristic of medieval monasticism. Around midday comes sext, another brief prayer session, followed by the main meal of the day in the refectory. This is not a feast. You sit at long wooden tables, perhaps on simple benches, in a large, unadorned hall. The meal is silent, broken only by the voice of a reader, who recites from Scripture or the lives of saints. This is another opportunity for spiritual nourishment while you consume your physical sustenance. The food itself is usually simple and often monotonous. You might receive a thick pottage of grains and vegetables, perhaps some bread, and occasionally, if it's not a fast day, some cheese or fish. Meat is strictly forbidden for much of the year, especially during Lent and Advent. Water or weak ale is your drink. There are no culinary delights, no rich spices, no elaborate preparations. The food is meant to sustain, not to indulge. You eat quickly, efficiently, and with gratitude, knowing that many outside the walls might go hungry. One humorous aside, if we can even call it that, is the monastic attitude towards cleanliness. While not exactly modern standards of hygiene, monasteries were often cleaner than the surrounding villages, simply out of necessity to prevent disease within a close-knit community. However, regular bathing was rare, and personal hygiene was rudimentary. Imagine the collective scent of unwashed wool and bodies, especially after a long day of labor. Perhaps the constant cold helped with certain odors, but it's safe to say that the medieval monk wasn't exactly known for their fragrant aura. After the midday meal, if there is one, comes none, around 3 p.m., followed by more work. The afternoon continues the pattern of structured activity, whether it's copying, gardening, or other monastic duties. The hours slowly tick by, marked by the sun's passage and the internal clock of your own body, growing increasingly weary. As evening approaches, the monastery prepares for vespers, the evening prayer, usually before sunset. The chapel fills once more, and the chants continue. There's a different quality to vespers, a winding down, a sense of gratitude for the day that is passing. The shadows lengthen, and the flickering candles cast dancing patterns on the ancient stone. This is followed by a light evening meal, often even simpler than the midday one, and then the final office of the day. Compline, Compline is the completion of the day, a short, poignant prayer service that marks the transition into night. It's often accompanied by a general confession and a final blessing. The Salve Regina, a hymn to the Virgin Mary, is a common closing prayer, sung softly in the dim light. After Compline, the great silence descends. No talking, no unnecessary noise, just the quiet preparation for sleep. You return to your dormitory, perhaps sharing a large room with many others, each in your simple cot or cell. The silence is profound, broken only by the sounds of sleep and the occasional rustle of cloth. You lay down, physically exhausted, spiritually drained, and mentally focused, ready for the cycle to begin anew in just a few short hours. This relentless routine, day after day, year after year, forms the very fabric of your monastic existence. It's a life defined by repetition, by discipline, and by a constant striving for spiritual perfection through communal devotion and tireless work. Historians still debate the true spiritual impact of such a rigid schedule on the individual monk. Was it truly conducive to deep contemplation? Or did the sheer exhaustion and monotony lead to a more rote, almost mechanical form of prayer, while undoubtedly challenging? Many sources indicate that monks found profound meaning and spiritual growth within this demanding framework, believing that through obedience and sacrifice, they were drawing closer to God. The structure, while seemingly oppressive from a modern perspective, also provided a sense of security and purpose in an otherwise chaotic world. You are a part of something larger than yourself, a vital cog in a spiritual engine that hums with constant prayer and labor, a constant vigil for the souls of humankind. The clang of the bell, the familiar cadence of chants, the chill of the stone, these are the constant companions of your days. But there's another, more visceral reality that defines your existence as a medieval monk: the food. Or rather, the lack thereof. You're not here for culinary delights. My friend, you're here for spiritual nourishment, and your plate reflects that commitment to austerity. Forget your morning avocado toast or your gourmet coffee. Your meals are designed for sustenance, not pleasure, a constant reminder of your vow of poverty and your detachment from worldly comforts. Your diet is dictated by the Rule of St. Benedict, a document that, while wise in many respects, certainly wasn't written by a Michelin star chef. The rule explicitly prohibits the consumption of quadrupeds, meaning four-footed animals. So, no beef, no pork, no lamb, no venison. For you, meat is a luxury strictly reserved for the sick and infirm, a medicinal rather than a dietary component. This is a significant deprivation, especially in a world where meat often represented status and energy. Instead, your primary protein sources are fish, if the monastery has access to a nearby river, lake, or even its own fish ponds. And sometimes, eggs or dairy products if they keep chickens or cows. Imagine sitting in the refectory, a large, usually unheated hall, at long wooden tables. The meal is served in silence, a reader's voice echoing through the vast space, reciting scripture or the lives of saints. This isn't a time for conversation or camaraderie. It's another opportunity for spiritual reflection, even during the act of eating. You pick up your simple wooden bowl or plate. What's on it? Often, it's pottage, a thick gruel or stew made from grains like oats, barley, or wheat, boiled with whatever vegetables are in season. Cabbage, leeks, onions, peas, or beans. It's hearty, certainly, but lacks variety and often flavor. Salt is a precious commodity, and spices, if used at all, are sparse and expensive, reserved for special occasions or medicinal purposes. Bread is your staple, your daily bread in the most literal sense. It's typically a coarse, whole-grain loaf, often dark and dense, baked in the monastery's own ovens. It's nourishing, but not the light, airy bread you might be accustomed to. It's meant to fill you, to provide energy for your manual labor and long hours of prayer. Sometimes, if you're lucky, and if the harvest has been good, there might be a bit of cheese, hard, sharp, and made from the monastery's own milk, or perhaps some simple curds. Fruit is a seasonal luxury. If the monastery has an orchard, you might get apples, pears, or plums when they are ripe. But there's no refrigeration, no easy transport, so fresh fruit is a fleeting delight. Dried fruits or preserves might appear rarely. Vegetables, as mentioned, are whatever can be grown in the monastic garden, dependent entirely on the season and the success of the harvest. Famines were a real and terrifying threat in the medieval period, and while monasteries generally managed their resources better than the average peasant, they were not entirely immune to widespread crop failures. Your beverage of choice is almost always water, often drawn from a well. It's safe to say that medieval water quality varied wildly, and while monasteries often had better access to clean sources than surrounding villages, it wasn't always pristine. For something more substantial, and perhaps safer, you drink weak ale or cider. Brewing was a common monastic activity, and the low alcohol content meant it was more of a liquid bread, providing calories and hydration, rather than an intoxicating drink. It was often safer than water, as the brewing process helped purify it. Imagine going through your entire day, from pre-dawn prayers to strenuous labor, fueled by little more than gruel and weak ale. It certainly puts modern energy drinks into perspective. There are also numerous fast days throughout the year. Lent, Advent, and every Friday are typically days of stricter abstinence. On these days, you might have only one meal, perhaps in the late afternoon, and it would be even simpler. No dairy, no eggs, just bread, water, and perhaps some vegetables. This isn't just about self-denial. It's about spiritual discipline, a way to identify with the suffering of Christ and to purify the soul. The constant hunger pangs are a physical reminder of your spiritual journey, a gentle torment that keeps your mind focused on higher things. One quirky detail that might surprise you is the occasional indulgence, albeit a very minor one. Monks were allowed to drink wine in moderation, especially on feast days, provided it was produced by the monastery or acquired within the rule. However, this was never about getting drunk. It was about fellowship and marking special occasions. Even then, it was often diluted with water. Another oddity, a common belief in the Middle Ages, even among learned monks, was in the medicinal properties of certain foods. For example, specific herbs might be added to your pottage not just for flavor, but for their perceived health benefits. The monastic diet stands in stark contrast to the often gluttonous feasts depicted in popular culture. There are no roasted suckling pigs, no overflowing goblets of wine for the average monk. Life within the cloister was about minimizing distractions, and elaborate meals were certainly considered a distraction from the true purpose of existence. It also served a practical purpose, rationing. With a large community to feed and limited resources, frugality was not just a virtue but a necessity. Think about the physical toll this diet takes. You are engaged in demanding physical labor, copying manuscripts in poor light, tilling fields, building, repairing. Yet your caloric intake is relatively low, and your protein sources are limited. You are constantly on the edge of hunger, a dull ache in your stomach that becomes a familiar companion. This physical deprivation is not meant to harm you, but to strengthen your spiritual resolve. It's a constant exercise in self-control, a training for the soul. Historians still debate the nutritional adequacy of the monastic diet. While it was certainly lacking in variety and some essential nutrients by modern standards, it was generally better than the diet of the average peasant, who often faced outright starvation. Monasteries, with their organized agriculture and storage capabilities, were often more resilient to famine. However, deficiencies would have been common, leading to various ailments. You would likely be thinner than your modern counterpart, with less muscle mass, and prone to fatigue. Yet, The relative stability and consistent if meager provision within the monastery offered a degree of security that was highly sought after in a volatile world. So, when you next grab a snack or prepare a meal, take a moment to reflect on the medieval monk. Their plate was a testament to their vows, a constant reminder of their commitment to a life of austerity and devotion. Every bite, every sip, was a conscious act of sacrifice, a step further on the path to spiritual purity. It was a humble, monotonous, but ultimately sustaining diet, designed to nourish the soul as much as the body. And perhaps, just perhaps, it made them appreciate the simple taste of a piece of coarse bread more than we can ever imagine. Your life as a medieval monk is one of profound internal focus, a continuous engagement with your spiritual self. Yet, even within the cloistered walls, you are not entirely cut off from the world. Your interaction with the outside, however, is a carefully controlled and often limited dance. A delicate balance between monastic detachment and the necessary realities of medieval existence. For the most part, the monastery is a self-sufficient island, a microcosm designed to provide for its own needs, minimizing reliance on the volatile world beyond its gates. Imagine the high walls surrounding your monastery, often fortified, sometimes even moated. These aren't just symbolic barriers, they are practical defenses. In an age rife with local skirmishes, banditry, and even full-blown warfare, the monastery often served as a refuge, a sanctuary not only for its inhabitants, but sometimes for the local populace seeking protection. These walls physically separate you from the chaos, the temptations, and the endless distractions of secular life. Your gaze, accustomed to the quiet of the cloister, views the outside world as a place of spiritual peril, a realm to be transcended rather than embraced. Your direct contact with the outside world is remarkably limited. Visits from family are rare, often discouraged, and when they do occur, they are strictly supervised and brief. The rule of Saint Benedict emphasizes the importance of detachment from worldly ties, including familial ones. This isn't out of cruelty, but out of a belief that such attachments can pull you away from your ultimate devotion to God. You've taken a vow of stability, meaning you are committed to this specific monastic community for life. There's no popping home for the holidays, no quick visits to friends in the next village. Your new family is the community within these walls, your fellow monks and your abbot. However, monasteries are not entirely isolated. They play a vital role in the broader medieval society, often serving as economic hubs, centers of learning, and even providers of charity. The monastery usually owns vast tracts of land, worked by lay brothers monks who focus primarily on manual labor or by peasant tenants. You might see these peasants bringing in their rents in kind, grain, livestock, or other produce, to the monastic granges. This is a practical interaction, a business transaction, not a social visit. You observe them from a distance, perhaps a fleeting glimpse as they approach the gatehouse, a reminder of the world you have left behind. The monastery also engages in trade. While self-sufficient in many ways, certain necessities, like salt, iron tools, or exotic spices for medicinal purposes, might need to be acquired from outside merchants. These transactions would typically be handled by the cellarer, a monk responsible for the monastery's provisions and economy. You, as a regular monk, would likely have no direct involvement in these dealings. Remaining within the monastic enclosure, the interactions are formal, brief, and purely transactional, carefully managed to avoid unnecessary worldly entanglement. Perhaps one of the most significant points of contact with the outside world is through the monastic hospitium, or guest house. Monasteries were renowned for their hospitality, offering lodging and food to travelers, pilgrims, and even noblemen. This was seen as a Christian duty, an act of charity enjoined by Scripture. As a monk, you might occasionally see these guests, perhaps glimpsing them in the courtyard or hearing their voices in the guest house area. However, interaction with them is again limited. You are not meant to engage in idle chatter or form personal relationships with outsiders. The guest house staff, often a few designated monks or lay brothers, would handle most of the direct interactions, serving the guests and attending to their needs. You might see a weary pilgrim, covered in dust from a long journey, seeking spiritual solace, or a wealthy lord passing through, demanding comfortable lodgings. These encounters are fleeting, providing a brief window into the diverse tapestry of medieval life. The monastery also often maintains a hospital or infirmary. While rudimentary by modern standards, these monastic hospitals provided a vital service in an age of rampant disease and limited medical care. Sick and infirm members of the surrounding community might seek healing and comfort within its walls. As a monk, especially if you had any medical inclination or were assigned duties there, you might tend to the sick, offering prayers, administering basic remedies, and providing palliative care. This is a powerful form of charity, a direct application of Christian compassion to the suffering of others. It's a stark reminder of the harsh realities of medieval health, and perhaps the closest you come to directly ministering to the needs of the outside world on a regular basis. Educational outreach, while not formal schooling for the masses, was another point of connection. Monasteries were often the sole repositories of learning in a largely illiterate society. Scribes painstakingly copied texts, preserving ancient knowledge. While most of this was for internal use or for training new monks, some monasteries might accept a few young boys from noble families as oblates or students, teaching them basic literacy and Latin. These boys would live within the monastery for a period, learning alongside the monks, before either choosing to join the order or returning to secular life. For you, these young, often boisterous, learners might represent a rare glimpse of youthful energy and a reminder of your own journey into the monastic life. One humorous observation about the monastic interaction with the outside world might be the constant need for alms and donations. While self-sufficient, monasteries were always in need of funds for building projects, new manuscripts, or simply to maintain their vast estates. This meant that abbots or designated monks would occasionally venture out into the world, traveling to secure patronage from wealthy nobles or even the king. These were official, pragmatic missions, not pleasure trips. Imagine the awkwardness of a monk, accustomed to silent contemplation and austerity, having to negotiate with a boisterous, self-important lord for a donation. It highlights the subtle tension between the spiritual ideal and the practical necessities of institutional survival. Historians still debate the extent to which monastic influence shaped the social fabric of medieval Europe. While physically isolated, the spiritual and economic power of monasteries radiated outwards, influencing everything from agricultural practices to political alliances. Monks often acted as spiritual advisors to kings and nobles, and some even became powerful bishops or cardinals. You, as a humble monk, are a small part of this vast, interconnected web, even if your personal world feels contained within stone walls. So, while your daily life is one of profound introversion and separation, you are not entirely invisible to the world. You are a silent observer, a disciplined participant in a community that, despite its detachment, remains deeply intertwined with the society it seeks to transcend. Your limited interactions serve as a constant reminder of the spiritual journey you have chosen, a path away from the clamor and distractions of the world, but always with its needs and its souls in your prayers. Beyond the chants and the communal meals, the monastic life for many was defined by a profound and often excruciating labor of love, the scriptorium. Imagine a room, often cold and poorly lit, where the only sounds are the scratching of quills, the rustle of parchment, and the occasional cough. This is where knowledge was preserved, replicated, and sometimes even created. For you, the monk assigned to this sacred task, it is a demanding, often solitary existence, a testament to patience, precision, and an unwavering dedication to the written word. You sit at a wooden desk, hunched over a large, smooth sheet of vellum or parchment. These aren't cheap paper notebooks. These are meticulously prepared animal skins. usually calf, goat, or sheep, painstakingly cleaned, stretched, scraped thin, and polished to create a surface receptive to ink. The preparation of these materials alone was a monumental task, often taking days. You might even have been involved in this process. The smell of animal hide and lime lingering in the air. Each sheet is precious, a significant investment of time and resources. Errors are not easily erased. Your tools are simple but vital. The quill pen, usually fashioned from a goose or swan feather, is your primary instrument. You've learned the delicate art of sharpening its tip with a small knife, ensuring a fine point that allows for elegant, consistent script. The ink, a rich, dark substance, is typically made from gallnuts, small growths on oak trees caused by wasps, iron salts, and gum arabic, boiled together to create a permanent, lustrous black. For special headings or initial letters, you might use red ink, derived from cinnabar or other pigments, and for truly illuminated manuscripts, a splash of vibrant colors or even shimmering gold leaf might be painstakingly applied. The work is incredibly slow. You are not simply copying words, you are replicating entire books, letter by letter, word by word, line by line. Before you begin, the parchment must be carefully ruled with faint lines to ensure uniformity of script. Then, with an exemplar, an existing book you are copying from, beside you, you begin. Your hand moves across the page, forming each letter with deliberate care. Consistency is key. Every A must look like every other A. Every T must align. This isn't about speed, it's about perfect reproduction, ensuring the accuracy of sacred texts and scholarly works. Think about the physical toll. Your eyes strain in the dim light, especially during the long winter months when daylight is scarce and artificial light comes from flickering oil lamps or beeswax candles. Both smoky and expensive, the constant focus on small details leads to headaches, blurred vision, and aching eyes. Your back aches from hours of being hunched over the desk. Your fingers cramp from the repetitive motion of holding the quill. The cold seeps into your bones, making your hands stiff and clumsy, especially when attempting delicate flourishes. In the summer, the heat can be stifling, and insects might buzz around your precious parchment. The content you are copying is often Latin scripture, Bibles, psalters, liturgical books, but monasteries also preserved and copied classical texts by Roman and Greek authors, philosophical treatises, legal documents, and chronicles of local history. You are, in essence, a human printing press, though infinitely slower and more prone to human error. Every mistake you make requires careful scraping with a knife, trying to remove the ink without tearing the fragile parchment. A major error might mean discarding an entire sheet, a significant loss of time and valuable material. Then there are the illuminations and miniatures. Not all monks were illuminators, but if you possessed artistic talent, you might be tasked with these elaborate decorations. This involves creating intricate capital letters, often highly decorated and colorful, at the beginning of chapters or sections. Or you might paint miniatures, small illustrations that depict scenes from the text. This requires an entirely different skill set, grinding pigments from minerals and plants, mixing them with egg yolk to create paint, and then applying them with tiny brushes. The gold leaf, painstakingly applied in thin sheets, shimmering as the light catches it, adds a divine aura to the text, a visual splendor meant to glorify God and inspire awe. This level of detail, the delicate brushstrokes, the vibrant colors against the cream of the parchment, is truly breathtaking. The scriptorium was a quiet, almost sacred space. Talking was forbidden or kept to a whisper, so as not to distract from the concentration required. The atmosphere was one of profound diligence, a silent testament to the monks' dedication to their craft and their faith. Imagine the years you would spend in this room. Your life measured in pages copied, volumes completed. It's a painstaking existence, but also one that offers a deep sense of purpose. You are not just a copyist, you are a preserver of knowledge, a guardian of the intellectual heritage of your time. Historians still debate the extent of innovation versus mere copying in medieval scriptoria. While the primary goal was faithful reproduction, subtle changes, interpretations, and even occasional errors inevitably crept into the texts. Sometimes, a particularly learned monk might add marginal notes or commentaries, subtly influencing future readers. The very act of copying forced a deep engagement with the text, a process that could lead to new insights and understanding, even if originality was not the explicit goal. One subtle, humorous element of the scriptorium might be the occasional frustrations of the scribes themselves, preserved in marginal notes. Sometimes, a tired monk, perhaps weary from the cold or boredom, would scrawl a complaint in the margin, "Oh, my aching fingers," or "Thank God, it's almost finished," or even, "This is a very heavy book to copy." These tiny personal glimpses offer a human touch to an otherwise austere and anonymous profession. It's a reminder that even in their devout dedication, monks were still very much human, susceptible to the same aches, pains, and moments of exasperation as anyone else. The scriptorium was, in many ways, the intellectual heart of the monastery. It was here that knowledge was preserved during a period when much of Europe was in chaos. Without the tireless efforts of these anonymous scribes, countless ancient texts would have been lost to history. Your work, however laborious and obscure, has a profound and lasting impact. Far beyond the confines of your monastic cell, you are a silent guardian of wisdom, a meticulous artisan of the word, shaping the intellectual landscape for centuries to come. The rigorous schedule, the sparse diet, the demanding labor, your life as a medieval monk is a testament to resilience. Yet, despite your fervent prayers and disciplined lifestyle, you are not immune to the inescapable realities of the medieval world's sickness and suffering. In an age without modern medicine, sanitation, or even a rudimentary understanding of germ theory, illness was a constant, terrifying companion, and recovery was often a matter of divine intervention or sheer luck. Imagine a persistent cough that racks your body in the damp chill of the chapel during matins, or a mysterious ache in your joints that intensifies with every hour spent hunched over a manuscript. These are not minor inconveniences. They are potential harbingers of serious, even fatal, ailments. The monastery, despite its relative order, is still a breeding ground for contagion within its close-knit community. A simple cold can quickly spread, and more virulent diseases can sweep through the dormitories, claiming lives with terrifying speed. Medical knowledge in the medieval period was a curious blend of ancient Greek and Roman theories, Christian belief, and folk remedies. The dominant theory was that of the four humors: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. Illness was believed to be caused by an imbalance of these humors, and treatments aimed to restore equilibrium through bloodletting, purging, or specific dietary interventions. You might find yourself being bled by the infirmarian, the monk responsible for the sick, a terrifying prospect involving sharp instruments and a lot of faith. The monastery's infirmary or hospital is a stark, utilitarian space. Here, the sick monks are cared for, separated from the main community to prevent the spread of disease, but also to allow them some respite from the rigorous monastic schedule. The infirmarian, while often well-meaning, possesses a limited arsenal of treatments. Herbal remedies are common, often grown in the monastic garden. You might be given concoctions of various plants, some with genuine medicinal properties, others based on superstition or tradition. Willow bark for pain, chamomile for sleep, various purgatives to cleanse the system. These are your pharmaceuticals. One common and devastating ailment was dysentery, caused by contaminated water or food, leading to severe dehydration and often death. Fevers, respiratory infections, skin diseases, and parasitic infections were rampant. Life expectancy was significantly lower than today, and childhood mortality was shockingly high, even if you survived these early threats. Life as a monk brought its own set of occupational hazards. The cold, Damp conditions often led to rheumatism and arthritis. The dim light of the scriptorium could cause severe eye strain and even blindness in later life. Constant kneeling and standing during prayers could lead to knee and back problems. Toothaches were a common agony. With no dentists to provide relief, a rotten tooth could lead to terrible infections, potentially spreading to the jaw or even the brain. Amputations were performed, but often without anesthesia and with a very high risk of infection. Childbirth, thankfully not a concern for you as a monk, was a leading cause of death for women. Imagine enduring such pain with only basic herbal pain relief or the solace of prayer. It really puts a bad day into perspective, doesn't it? Prayer and faith played an enormous role in healing. Illness was often seen as divine punishment or a test of faith. Pilgrimages to sacred sites, veneration of relics, and fervent prayers were often considered as important, if not more important, than any physical remedy. You would be surrounded by fellow monks praying for your recovery, chanting psalms, and offering spiritual comfort. This communal support, while not a cure, undoubtedly provided immense psychological solace in times of suffering. A fascinating, if often disturbing aspect of medieval medicine was the reliance on superstition and folk beliefs. Alongside rational herbal remedies, you might encounter practices like the application of poultices made from bizarre ingredients, or the wearing of amulets to ward off evil spirits believed to cause disease. The line between science, magic, and faith was often blurred, and even educated monks might subscribe to beliefs that seem utterly illogical to us today. Historians still debate the true efficacy of many medieval medical practices. While some herbal remedies had merit, others were probably more harmful than helpful. One particularly grim reality was the lack of effective pain management. Surgeries, when performed, were excruciating. There were no general anesthetics like we have today. Sometimes, alcohol or opiates from poppies might be used, but their availability was limited and their efficacy inconsistent. You learned to endure pain, to see it as a form of suffering that brought you closer to Christ. This stoicism, born of necessity, was a hallmark of medieval life. Despite the hardships, the monastic community provided a level of care and support that was often superior to what was available to the average peasant. You had a roof over your head, food however simple, and the collective prayers and limited medical knowledge of your brothers. This relative security, even in sickness, was another unspoken benefit of choosing the monastic life. While you might suffer, you wouldn't suffer alone. So, when you feel a sniffle coming on, and you reach for your over-the-counter cold medicine, spare a thought for your medieval counterpart. Their battle against illness was a far more desperate and often losing fight, fought with faith, fortitude, and a limited array of crude remedies. It was a constant reminder of human fragility and the overwhelming power of disease in a world that had yet to unlock the secrets of modern medicine. You learned to live with pain, to accept suffering, and to find solace not in a quick fix, but in the enduring power of your faith. You live within a framework of absolute devotion, a life consecrated by three powerful and challenging vows: poverty, chastity, and obedience. These aren't mere guidelines, they are the bedrock of your monastic existence, shaping every decision, every interaction, and every quiet moment of your day. To understand what life sucked like for a medieval monk, you must first grasp the profound weight and constant presence of these solemn promises. Let's begin with poverty. When you entered the monastery, you renounced all personal possessions. Your clothes, your money, any inheritance, all were surrendered. You own nothing. Your habit is provided by the community. Your meals are taken in common. Your bed is a simple cot in a shared dormitory. This isn't just about financial deprivation. It's a profound spiritual exercise designed to strip away attachment to worldly goods. The idea is that material possessions can become idols, distracting you from your true focus, God. By owning nothing, you are, theoretically, completely free to serve. Imagine the psychological shift. Every object you touch, every tool you use, belongs to the monastery. There's no my book or my personal blanket. It's all our book, our blanket. This communal ownership fosters a sense of unity and interdependence, but it also demands a constant suppression of individual desire. If you crave something, a warmer habit, a softer pillow, a different kind of food, you must immediately push that thought away, reminding yourself that your comfort lies not in earthly things, but in spiritual contentment. This constant self-denial is a form of spiritual training, strengthening your will against temptation. Then comes chastity. This vow means a lifelong commitment to celibacy, to abstain from all sexual activity and romantic relationships. In an era where marriage and procreation were the norm, this was a radical choice. But for the monk, it's about dedicating all your love and desire, all your emotional and physical energy, entirely to God. Your spiritual marriage is to Christ and the Church. This isn't a passive vow. It requires active discipline of your thoughts and desires. You are human, after all, and the natural inclinations of the body are strong. This means a constant vigil against temptation, a turning of the mind towards prayer and spiritual pursuits whenever worldly desires arise. The monastery environment, with its strict segregation of sexes if it's a male monastery, there are no women except, perhaps, very elderly laundresses or visitors in designated areas. Silence, and rigorous schedule, is designed to support this vow. But ultimately, the battle is internal. It's a continuous process of self-mastery, a spiritual wrestling match that takes place in the quiet of your cell, during long hours of prayer, and in the solitude of your work. Historians still debate the practical realities of enforcing such a vow, acknowledging that human frailty meant occasional lapses likely occurred, but the ideal of unwavering chastity remained paramount. This wasn't merely a rule, it was a profound spiritual aspiration, a path to purity. Perhaps the most challenging vow for many is obedience. You have surrendered your individual will to the abbot, the spiritual father of the monastery. His word is essentially law, seen as the voice of God. This means you must obey without question, without hesitation, and without complaint. If the abbot tells you to copy a difficult manuscript, to work in the fields, or to undertake a long journey, you do so. If he assigns you a task you dislike, or a duty you find demeaning, you accept it with humility. This isn't about blind subservience, but about humility and trust. By surrendering your own will, you are believed to overcome pride, the root of all sins, and align yourself more closely with divine will. Consider the implications of this. There's no room for personal ambition, for career progression as you might understand it. Your career is your spiritual growth, and your promotion is deeper humility and closer union with God. If you have an idea, a suggestion, or a personal preference, you must defer to the judgment of the abbot and the wisdom of the community. This can be incredibly difficult, especially for those with strong personalities or intellectual inclinations. It requires a constant act of self-effacement, a continuous letting go of your own desires and opinions. One subtle, almost humorous, aspect of the vow of obedience is the intricate system of rules and permissions within the monastery. You can't just decide to leave the cloister, or even to speak during the great silence. Without permission, everything is regulated. Need a new habit. Ask permission. Feeling unwell and need to visit the infirmary. Ask permission. This constant need for authorization, while seemingly infantilizing from a modern perspective, reinforced the idea of complete submission to the communal order and the authority of the abbot. It's a humorous thought to imagine a monk needing to formally request to use the medieval equivalent of a restroom. The monastic life, built upon these three vows, is a radical countercultural movement for its time, and even more so when viewed through modern eyes. It represents a complete rejection of many fundamental aspects of secular society: wealth, family, and personal autonomy. Yet, For thousands of individuals throughout the medieval period, it was the chosen path, a demanding but deeply meaningful way of life. It offered a structure, a purpose, and a community that was often lacking in the chaotic and often brutal world outside the monastery walls. Historians still debate the psychological impact of these vows. While for many, they undoubtedly fostered spiritual growth and inner peace, for others, they could lead to internal conflict, suppressed desires, and a sense of profound struggle. The very intensity of the vows meant that the few instances of monks breaking them were often met with severe condemnation, underscoring the high expectations placed upon those who committed to this rigorous path. You are not just living by rules, you are striving for an ideal, a constant upward climb towards spiritual perfection. With these vows as your steadfast, unyielding guide, they are the constant whisper in your ear, the compass guiding your soul. Amidst the relentless schedule, the austere diet, and the demanding vows, you might imagine a medieval monk's life to be one of unremitting gloom. Yet, even within the confines of the cloister, moments of quiet joy and unexpected solace were found. Brief respites that illuminated the demanding path you had chosen. These weren't grand celebrations, but subtle shifts in atmosphere, tiny sparks of light in an otherwise shadowed existence. Consider the simple satisfaction of a well-executed task. Perhaps you've spent weeks meticulously copying a complex manuscript, and as you add the final flourish to an illuminated initial, there's a deep sense of accomplishment. Or you've toiled in the monastic garden, and now the first tender shoots of spring vegetables emerge, promising future sustenance. The very act of contributing meaningfully to your community, of seeing the tangible results of your labor, brings a quiet pride. This isn't personal glory. It's a shared success, a collective achievement that benefits all your brothers. Then there's the profound beauty of Gregorian chant. While often repetitive and demanding to perform for hours each day, there are moments when the voices of the choir blend perfectly, rising and falling in harmonious waves, filling the chapel with an ethereal sound. In these moments, you might feel a profound connection to the divine, a sense of transcendence that lifts you above the mundane. The ancient melodies, passed down through generations, carry a spiritual weight that resonates deep within your soul. It's a collective prayer, a shared experience of beauty that unifies the community and offers a glimpse of heavenly perfection. Imagine the resonance of dozens of male voices in a stone chapel, the air vibrating with devotion. It's a sound that could transport you. The monastic library, often a quiet haven, offers another source of profound joy for the intellectually inclined monk. After hours of copying, you might be granted permission to spend time reading the precious volumes, to hold an ancient text, meticulously copied by hands long gone, to delve into the wisdom of the church fathers or the philosophical insights of classical thinkers is a privilege beyond measure. For a mind hungry for knowledge, this access to learning in a largely illiterate world is a deep and fulfilling pleasure. It's a journey not of the body, but of the mind, across centuries and continents. Nature, too, provides solace. While your world is largely defined by stone walls, the monastery often includes a cloister garden, a tranquil, enclosed courtyard. Here, surrounded by herbs, flowers, and perhaps a fountain, you might find moments of peaceful contemplation. The scent of blooming roses, the gentle hum of bees, the warmth of the sun on your face, the quiet rustle of leaves. These simple sensory pleasures connect you to the natural world and offer a momentary escape from the austerity of your inner life. You might observe a bird building its nest, or a butterfly flitting among the flowers, finding beauty and order in God's creation. The fellowship of your brothers, while often expressed in silence, is another source of quiet comfort. You share a common purpose, a common struggle, and a common faith. There's an unspoken understanding, a shared sense of belonging that comes from living in such close proximity, bound by identical vows, a knowing glance during a particularly long service, a shared smile over a small kindness, or the steady presence of familiar faces. These subtle forms of camaraderie affirm your place within the community. It's a bond forged not by blood, but by shared spiritual aspiration. Perhaps you might even exchange a rare, quiet joke with a fellow monk during a moment of permitted speech, a brief flicker of lightheartedness that breaks the solemnity. Feast days, though still austere by modern standards, offer a welcome change of pace. On these special occasions, Christmas, Easter, the feast day of the monastery's patron saint, the dietary restrictions might be slightly relaxed. Perhaps a small portion of a special dish, a richer bread, or a slightly stronger ale. The liturgical services are more elaborate, the chants more celebratory. These are moments when the spiritual intensity is colored with a deeper sense of joy and communal celebration, a reminder of the glory of God and the hope of salvation. It's a collective exhalation, a moment to truly feel the spirit of celebration, however restrained. One particular, perhaps humorous, aspect of monastic life that brought a unique form of enjoyment was the unexpected visit from a particularly eloquent or engaging preacher or a traveling bishop. Accustomed to the internal rhythms and familiar voices of their own community, the arrival of an outsider with fresh perspectives, news from distant lands however limited, and a captivating speaking style could be a genuine treat. Imagine the quiet buzz of anticipation, the rare opportunity to hear a different voice, a new interpretation of scripture, breaking the monotony of the usual monastic routine. It was a form of intellectual stimulation and a window to the broader church that would have been greatly appreciated. Historians still debate the emotional lives of medieval monks. While the emphasis was on suppressing individual emotions for the sake of spiritual purity, it's clear from various monastic writings that monks experienced the full range of human feelings: joy, sadness, frustration, peace. The structured life and communal support provided a framework within which these emotions could be managed and channeled, aiming always towards a deeper connection with God. The moments of joy, however small, were profound precisely because they stood out against a backdrop of austerity and demanding discipline. You learn to find beauty in simplicity, peace in silence, and companionship in shared devotion. These were the true treasures of your monastic life. Quiet affirmations that your chosen path, however arduous, was ultimately one of spiritual fulfillment. While your world as a medieval monk is primarily confined within the high walls of the monastery, the absolute truth is that complete isolation is impossible. There are rare, significant occasions when you, or at least some of your brothers, must venture beyond the cloister walls. Stepping back into the bustling, chaotic, and often spiritually perilous world you vowed to renounce. These excursions are not for pleasure or personal exploration, but for vital monastic functions, offering a stark contrast to your disciplined internal life. One of the most common reasons for a monk to leave the monastery is for official business. This could involve collecting rents from distant monastic properties, negotiating with a local lord for protection or privileges, or even traveling to a distant city to purchase essential goods not produced within the monastery, such as specialized tools, rare pigments for the scriptorium, or perhaps even exotic spices for the infirmary. Such journeys are often long, arduous, and fraught with peril. Roads are mere tracks, bandits a constant threat, and accommodations basic at best. You would travel with a companion or two, perhaps a lay brother, for safety and mutual support, relying on the hospitality of other monasteries or friendly noble houses along the way. Imagine the sensory overload as you step outside the familiar quiet of the cloister. The cacophony of a medieval town or village would assault your ears: the shouts of merchants, the braying of donkeys, the clatter of carts, the babble of countless unfamiliar voices. The smells would be overwhelming: wood smoke, unwashed bodies, animal waste, cooking fires, all mingling in a potent assault on your senses. The sight of so many people, dressed in colorful or often drab and dirty secular clothing, going about their worldly concerns, would be a stark reminder of the life you left behind. It's a sensory shock, a jarring reintroduction to the vibrancy and squalor of the outside world. Another reason for a monk to travel is for pilgrimage. While not an everyday occurrence, some monasteries might send a select few monks on a pilgrimage to a major shrine, perhaps Rome, Jerusalem, or the tomb of a revered saint. This is a deeply spiritual journey, undertaken for the salvation of the community or as a special penance. It's an opportunity to visit holy sites, venerate relics, and gain spiritual merit. Such journeys are even longer and more dangerous than business trips, often taking months or even years. You would encounter a wide array of fellow pilgrims, nobles, peasants, merchants, all united by their faith, but vastly different in their worldly experiences. You would rely on the kindness of strangers, the charity of other religious houses, and your own unwavering faith to see you through. Consider a humorous anecdote here even on serious pilgrimages. Monks, being human, occasionally brought back more than just spiritual enlightenment. Tales abound of monks returning with unique regional recipes, new agricultural techniques learned from other monasteries, or even, perhaps, a slightly expanded worldview that subtly challenged their cloistered perspective, though they would certainly never admit it to the abbot. It's a subtle reminder that even the most rigid systems can be influenced by unexpected external encounters. Sometimes, a monk might leave the monastery to study at a university. In the later medieval period, some monasteries sent their most promising scholars to the nascent universities in Paris, Bologna, or Oxford to deepen their theological or philosophical knowledge. This is an incredible privilege, offering access to different libraries, new ideas, and the intellectual ferment of academic life. However, it's also a test of your vows. Surrounded by secular students, exposed to debates and ideas that might challenge monastic orthodoxy, you must remain steadfast in your commitment. This is intellectual engagement, but also a constant exercise in self-discipline, ensuring that worldly knowledge does not overshadow spiritual wisdom. A more solemn reason for leaving the monastery is to attend a chapter general. This is a meeting of abbots and representatives from various monasteries within a particular order like the Cistercians or Benedictines, held to discuss common issues, elect new leaders, or reform practices. These gatherings are significant events, requiring travel, deliberation, and diplomacy. For the monk chosen to represent his community, it's a moment of great responsibility, where you speak not for yourself, but for your brothers back home. Historians still debate the psychological impact of these occasional excursions. For some monks, they might have been a source of profound spiritual renewal, a fresh perspective on the world they served through prayer. For others, they could be deeply unsettling, a painful reminder of the temptations and complexities of secular life, making their return to the cloister a welcome relief. The very act of leaving, however briefly, underscored the unique and separate nature of monastic life. You are a man apart, a member of a different order, even when walking among the common folk. The habit you wear immediately identifies you, setting you apart and eliciting reactions ranging from reverence to suspicion. These journeys, though rare and often uncomfortable, were vital veins connecting the seemingly isolated monastery to the larger body of medieval society. They ensured the flow of resources, knowledge, and spiritual leadership. For you, the monk on such a journey, each step outside the cloister gate is a reaffirmation of your commitment, a test of your discipline, a broadening of your experience, and ultimately, a path that always leads back to the quiet, familiar sanctuary of your spiritual home. The world outside beckons, but your true purpose lies within. You've traversed the rigid hours, endured the sparse meals, embraced the challenging vows, and even, on rare occasions, glimpsed the chaotic world beyond your cloister. Now, as your journey through the medieval monk's life draws to a close, it's time to reflect on the enduring legacy of this seemingly isolated existence. For despite the strictures and the self-imposed detachment, the medieval monastery was far from insignificant. It was a powerful force that profoundly shaped the intellectual, spiritual, and even economic landscape of Europe for centuries, leaving an indelible mark that continues to resonate today. Consider, first and foremost, the preservation of knowledge. In an age when barbarian invasions had shattered empires and literacy was a rare commodity, monasteries became the unlikeliest of intellectual sanctuaries. Within the scriptorium, as you recall from your painstaking hours, monks meticulously copied not only sacred texts like the Bible and liturgical books but also the works of classical antiquity. Without these tireless scribes, the writings of Plato, Aristotle, Virgil, and countless other Greek and Roman authors would have been lost forever to the ravages of time and neglect. They were the human hard drives of the Middle Ages, silently ensuring that the flame of learning continued to flicker. Even in the darkest periods, this wasn't merely rote copying, it was an act of profound cultural preservation, a selfless dedication to safeguarding the intellectual heritage of Western civilization. Beyond preservation, monasteries were also centers of innovation and education. While not universities in the modern sense, they were often the only places where formal education existed. Novices were taught Latin, grammar, rhetoric, and dialectic. Talented monks delved into theology, philosophy, and history. They developed new agricultural techniques, improving crop yields and land management. They perfected brewing and winemaking processes. Some even pioneered early forms of clockmaking and engineering. These advancements, born of necessity and intellectual curiosity within the monastic framework, often slowly disseminated outwards, contributing to broader societal progress. The monastic gardens, for instance, were not just sources of food but also living laboratories for herbal medicine and agricultural experimentation. Think about the sheer spiritual influence. Monasteries were seen as beacons of piety, places where individuals genuinely sought spiritual perfection. They served as powerful examples of Christian living, inspiring laypeople and influencing the moral compass of society. Pilgrims flocked to monastic shrines, seeking spiritual solace, healing, and guidance. Abbots often served as advisors to kings and nobles, wielding considerable moral and sometimes political authority. The constant round of prayers performed within the monastic walls was believed to benefit all of Christendom, offering intercession for the souls of the living and the dead. This spiritual power, though intangible, was profoundly real in the medieval mindset. Economically, monasteries were often major landholders and agricultural powerhouses. They managed vast estates, employed numerous lay workers, and produced a wide array of goods, from grain and wine to textiles and crafted items. Their organized approach to agriculture and resource management often made them more resilient to famine and economic instability than the surrounding secular communities. They built mills, roads, and bridges, contributing to local infrastructure. Their organized economic activity laid some of the groundwork for more complex economic systems that would emerge in later centuries. It's almost a humorous thought to consider a medieval monastery as a kind of proto-corporation, meticulously managed and economically impactful, but for spiritual rather than purely material gain. Historians still debate the precise extent to which monasticism was a force for social mobility. While ostensibly open to all social classes, with individuals from noble families and peasant backgrounds entering the cloister, opportunities for advancement within the monastic hierarchy, like becoming an abbot, might still have favored those with connections or prior education. However, it's undeniable that for many, particularly second sons with no inheritance or individuals seeking refuge from a brutal world, the monastery offered a structured path, a sense of belonging, and a chance for intellectual and spiritual development that would have been utterly unavailable elsewhere. The architectural legacy is another tangible reminder. The magnificent cathedrals and grand monastic complexes that still stand today are a testament to the skill, dedication, and long-term vision of monastic communities. These weren't built in a year. They were often projects spanning generations, requiring immense planning, labor, and resources. You, as a monk, might have contributed to their construction, carrying stones, mixing mortar, or perhaps even designing elements if you were one of the rare monastic architects. They are physical manifestations of the enduring faith and communal effort that defined monastic life. Finally, the very concept of a structured, disciplined life, with a clear purpose and shared goals, has resonated through history. While the specific forms have changed, the monastic ideal has influenced everything from modern educational institutions to charitable organizations, even finding echoes in the disciplined routines of some modern self-help movements. The idea of dedicating oneself to a higher purpose, of finding meaning in community and routine, is a universal human aspiration that the medieval monks embodied in its purest form.